How are we doing, YouTubers? It's Leo Alderpold. Today is a very exciting day for me, and I'll get to why in a moment. I'm just smoking in a new Morgan Bones tobacco called White Dog by HU, which my good friend Vogie73 gave to me. And you're absolutely right, Wolfgang, it does taste of cedar wood. But the reason it's fitting is because the woodland where I'm standing also has a connection of the canine variety. But I'll get to that in a minute as well. I've been wanting to bring you folks here for a long time because one of the things that I quite often moan and whinge about is the lack of wilderness in this country. But not today. The woodland that I'm standing in is probably, for me, without a doubt, the most fascinating and magical and interesting woodland in the whole of the British Isles. Now, where I am is a place called Wistman's Wood on Dartmoor in the southwest of England. Now, Dartmoor, many people will be familiar with because of Sherlock Holmes and the Hound of the Baskervilles, which was set around this area. But it's a very bleak, very windswept and very barren place. But it's not always been that way. About 7,000 years ago, Dartmoor, when the climate was milder, was covered in forest. And all on the landscape around me here, there are remnants of the people that lived here 7,000 years ago. So there's barrows and graves and old houses, stone round houses, stone circles, standing stones. It's a very ancient, very, very interesting landscape. And this woodland that I'm standing in right now is actually a remnant of the woodland that once stood and covered the entire of Dartmoor 7,000 years ago. Imagine that. The woodland that I'm standing in is 7,000 years old. Now, the oldest trees here, like this one behind me here, are about 400 or 500 years old. But they've never gotten higher than about 15 feet. And the reason for that is because the ground on which we're standing is very acidic and very poor. There's not a great deal of nutrients. We're at 1,400 feet above sea level, which is the upper limit of where these oak trees, these sessile oak trees, will really grow. And consequently their growth has been stunted. So despite the fact that they're 400 or 500 years old, like this fella behind me, they're only about 15 foot high, which is amazing. Now, the other great thing about this woodland, in terms of biodiversity, is because it's so old and the air up here is clean and it gets a lot of rain, it's probably got the highest concentration anywhere of bryophytes, lichens, mosses, liverworts. And on a single tree species there could be as many as 50 or 60 different species of moss or liverwort or lichen grown, which is incredible. Now, the reason why this woodland is still here is still not entirely known, but it's believed that basically it's quite inaccessible. There's never been any opportunity to graze in here, and more importantly, I'm standing on a rock floor, which locally we call clitter, which was the remnants basically of the tors, which are up on the hill there above me, which during the geological process of freeze and thaw, when the water gets in cracks in the rock and then freezes and expands and breaks the rock apart, these boulders have all tumbled down to this hillside, down to the bottom of the hillside here, and pretty much anywhere you walk around here you're at risk of breaking a leg. So people just wouldn't have come in here with their animals, and they wouldn't have come in here to try and get timber or anything like that. It's just too difficult to work. But that said, there's a lot of other really interesting history in this woodland too. Now, legend has it that it was actually planted by the Druids, which I don't believe personally, but still. The name Wistman's Wood, there's a little bit of discussion as to where the name comes from, but it's thought that the name Wist is a corruption of the Saxon word wisht, which means fairy-led or haunted. And this woodland has an association with what's known as the Wild Hunt, which is a European myth that on certain nights of the year the devil and his hounds, which were known as whist hounds, would roam the landscape in search of souls to take to hell. And it is said that if you spend a night in these woods, then the devil's wished hounds will come out from the rocks and take you to hell. So that's one potential origin of the name. The other origin of the name is that Wistman's is a corruption of the word wise man's, which similarly also actually really meant fairies. And fairies were not good creatures, good spirits, you understand. Fairies in folklore and mythology are actually really mean and nasty and evil things. So there was probably a lot of local legend that kept people out of this woodland in the first place. Now, personally, I find it's the most amazing woodland I've ever been to. I love it here. I don't come here often enough. It's about an hour or so's drive from where I live, and then a bit of a walk. And unfortunately, like everywhere else in this country, you get a lot of people walking around. But back in 1790s, the Reverend Sweet once wrote of this woodland that it is hardly possible to conceive of anything of the sort so grotesque as this wood appears. Well, I wouldn't expect anything but poison to come from the lips of a priest. And I'm much more inclined to go with what the poet Sophie Dixon wrote in 1829. She said, "Scarce hoarier seems the ancient wood, whose shivered trunks of age declare what scathe of tempests they have stood, in the rock's crevice rooted there. Yet still young foliage, fresh and fair, springs forth each mossy bough to dress, and bid e'en Dartmoor's valleys share a forest wilderness." Which I think is a much more lovely way to think of this woodland. One of the other local legends is that the devil lives here. And a local story goes that a farmer, drunk one night, was riding from Widdicombe, which is over in that direction, back to his house, when he came across the devil and his wished hands out on the hunt. And the farmer said to the devil, "Hey, old Nick, have you been successful and killed tonight?" And the devil threw the farmer a sack and said, "Why, yes, I have, and here's one." And the man opened the sack, and it was the body of his own child. But I don't want to leave you with that thought. I want to leave you with the thought that this woodland has been standing unchanged in this location and here in southwest England for 7,000 years. And I don't know about you, but that gets me really excited. So, take it easy, folks, and I will see you again real soon.